Hello everyone. So before we start this session, let's all meet Julie. Julie is an Android engineer who is working right now at XYZ company, and she's working on ABC TV mobile app. Before we start, can you all confirm whether you are able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Julie has to build an application where she has to list down the popular TV shows, and she needs to use pagination. Their backend is supporting pagination, so she needs to use pagination there. And She has certain requirements. For normal pagination, she needs to load the data lazily in chunks or pages rather than loading all the data at once. And she needs to use the network and system resources efficiently. And she should be able to load the next page once the end of the page is reached. And multiple requests or duplicate requests shouldn't be triggered for the same page. And she wants to have built-in error handling and refresh retry mechanism. And she decided to use paging tool library, which is part of architecture components. And some of her requirements, she is able to see her requirements getting met in paging tool library. Like paging with paging 2 also you get support for maintaining your keys. But in paging 2 there were certain she comes across certain demerits, like paging 2 does not have built-in error handling, it does not have refresh retry mechanism, it does not support Kotlin coroutines flow. And right now she's writing in Rx Java, and she plans to move her code to Kotlin coroutines later, and a flow as well. So she wants the library to be supporting all these constructs. And she wants that with the help of the library she should be able to add a header and footer to the list, and she should be able to add list item separators. So she goes through paging too, and she sees that most of her requirements are not getting met to in paging too. So then she goes to one and only Google. So she goes to Google and she tells them that all these are not present in paging 2. If she has to build an application which has paging of this sort and all these requirements, then she'll have to write a lot of code and functionality. So to solve her problem, Google brings in paging 3. So, hello everyone. I'm Monika Kumar Jethani, and I welcome you all to this session on Let's Get That Page with Paging 3. So, who am I? I am an Android engineer working at Walmart Global Tech currently, and I'm from India. I am a chef, reader, writer, and speaker. So, I cook both recipes as well as code. And my Twitter handle is at Monika underscore Jethani. So, if you want to reach out to me after this session for any questions, you can write me an email or you can reach out to me on Twitter. So, here with paging 3, the paging 3 is actually designed to work very well with the architecture which has been proposed by Google. So paging 3 components are laid out to your entire MVVM architecture, your repository layer, your view model layer, as well as a UI layer. So in repository, we will either be using paging source or remote mediator or both of them. So paging source is meant to be used when you have one data source, be it network or be it database or file. And remote mediator is meant to be used when you have a layered data source, like when you plan to get the data from network and have it in the database. And in that case you'll be using both your remote mediator and paging source. Remote mediator will do the work of hitting the network and getting the data and putting it to the onto your database, and then you'll have to have a paging source to your database to have the data flowing further through the layers. So in your view model, you'll be creating a pager, and it will be taking data from your paging source and passing it ahead through a stream of paging data. and it will pass this data, the stream of data, to your UI. And your UI will have your paging data adapter, which is similar to your any of your recycler view adapter, and that will be responsible for loading your data onto the UI. So to get started with paging 3, we include the dependency. Here we have the same paging runtime dependency as we had earlier. Only thing which changes is the paging version. So here I have a demo uh, where in the screen, like we load the popular TV shows, and we have pagination in the screen, and this is simple paging with network demo, because here I'm simply fetching from the network and showing it onto the UI. I'm using TMDB API. I'm listing down the popular TV shows which are sorted by popularity. And also, as you saw in the beginning, like when the app starts, we have a loading spinner. So initially there's a initial loading takes place, and after that, when the paging data gets loaded, then the moment the user reaches the end of the list, again loading takes place. And also this list has been segregated by list separators. So you can see, because products because the TV shows are laid according to the descending order of popularity. So they are segregated by separators. Like if they have less than 2,500 popularity or less than 2,000 popularity, in this way they have been segregated. So I'll give you a code walkthrough of the demo. So first, we need to create a paging source. So you need to create a class which extends from paging source, and it needs to have the key and value. So key is the like type, basically what kind of data you with what kind of data you want to get your result. So like here we are fetching the data through pages. So page A will be an integer, so key will be an integer, and value will be what we are fetching. Like in this case, we are fetching a TV show. So when you try to extend paging source, you will have to implement this load method. So load is will be a suspend method. So because it's a suspend method, you can call any other suspend method here. Like you can make your network calls here in load method, or your database call. You can call that suspend function basically, which does that. And the input parameters to load are load params. So they will be like your key, your page size, and the output of this function is load result. So the result will be either load result of pages or load result of error. So here you can see that the first time the load function is invoked, the key will have null value. So that's why the first line after try is like, if the key has null value, then it should take a value of 1. And then we fetch the data corresponding to that particular page. And after we do that, we return the load result of page with the data, the previous key and the next key. So when this is called the first time, that time obviously previous key will be null and next key will be the +1 key, that is 2. And next time when the load function gets called after the initial load, like second time, that time the key will have value 2. So it will have value 2, the second page will be fetched, and the result will be returned with the previous key as 1 and next key as 3. And if at any point there's an error in loading the data, then load result.error will be returned with the exception. And next we create a pager. So in this pager, we give it a paging configuration, and we give it the paging source. So pager is responsible for calling the load method of your paging source. And in paging configuration, you can give several configuration properties, like page size is a mandatory value which you need to give. Apart from that, there are other properties also which you can give, like the initial load, enable placeholders. Those are optional. So with the placeholder, we get the paging data stream. and you can see that it this returns a flow. But paging library has been it's compatible with Rx Java live data, as I told earlier. So in paging library, when you use it with Rx Java, you will be extending the Rx paging source, and you'll be overriding the load single method. And similarly here, when you use a pager, you will be using your flowable observable, so you can get a stream of your flowable or observable. And similarly with live data, you can get stream of live data. Apart from that, here I have used cached in operator, cached in function. So the reason why I've used cached in is because I want to preserve the data stream through your orientation changes. So one thing to keep in mind is cached in should be called after all your transformations. So like you have transformations on your live data on your Rx. Similarly, they can be applied to the stream of paging data as well, and I'll talk about it later. But one thing which I wanted to tell here is that cached in can be used to cache the data stream. It should be used after you apply all the transformations. So next we create in the UI, we create a paging data adapter. So we have a class, adapter class, which extends from paging data adapter, and it uses a diffutal callback um, for a performance like good performance updating. And your adapter class is similar to any other adapter class, but only that it works very well with the paging data. And now binding it to the UI. UI binding it to the UI is very same as like how you bind your adapter to your recycler view. You need to create an instance and bind it to the recycler view. But here we are like in the lifecycle scope, we fetch the data and we submit it to the adapter. So we submit the entire paging data flow to the adapter. So adapter, as I told, that it is like it's similar to any other like normal adapter, but it is able to display the paging data. So now moving on to displaying loading states. So in the demo I showed, like first time when the app loads, we have the initial load. And So for that, we can simply achieve it in paging 3 with the help of load state listener. So here we attach the load state listener to our adapter, and then we check if the load state refresh is loading. We make the progress bar visible. If it's not loading, then we check whether it's error, like whether it's error in the load state append, prepend, and refresh. So refresh is the first time, append is like you have an error afterwards, a prepend is before. And if it is in any if the load state is error in any of the load states, then we simply show our error text. Then moving on to creating load state adapter. So you might have noticed this in the demo, that first time we have the initial loading, and post that whenever the user moves to the end of the list, we have the loading spinner. So that loading spinner, we can have it as, because it is linked to the paging data list, we can have it as a list item, so we can have it as a footer. So we do that by creating load state adapter. And so we create a class which extends from load state adapter. And then we handle the states, like whether to make the we create a layout for it, and then we make the particular views visible, whether retry or progress or error message visible, based on whether the load state is loading or not loading or error. And then we attach it as a, like I attach it as a footer to my recycler view. But like you can see that here I'm attaching it as a footer to the paging data adapter. But basically there are other methods also, like with load state header, so you can have anything as a header to your paging data adapter, and you can also use the method with load state header and footer to attach something as to attach like views as header and footer to your paging data adapter. So now moving on to applying transformations. So you can apply transformations like map, filter, insert separators to your paging data stream, like you apply to your Rx stream or live data stream. Here I'm using transformation of map and then applying insert and then inserting separator. So like you saw that some of the, like in the demo, some of, like most of the items are list items, but there is segregation in the list items through separators. So basically from the network I will get simply the list of TV shows. In those I have to insert the separator, so that's why I'm using map. um, and then I'm inserting the separators. So separator is I've created separator as a separator item. Like separator item will have its own layout, its own view holder, and then after that I'm inserting the separators. So this transformation I've done in the view model layer, and here when I use this insert separators, that time I get a pair before after pair. So here if after is null, that means like we are at the end of the list. So if you want to insert something at the end of the list, you can insert it here. And then before is null means we are at the beginning of the list. So if you want to insert something in the beginning of the list, you can do it here. And if you want to insert something between two list items, then you can like here I've applied a check, I've applied a if condition where I'm checking the before and after the popularity, and if there's a difference in their popularity, then I'm adding a separator item. So, for when you have these separators, you need to have their layout, and you need to use this get item view type in your adapter, and you need to, based on the view type, you need to have your, you need to incorporate separator part also in your on create view holder and on bind view holder. So, moving on to the second demo. So, here, this is a demo of paging with both network and database. So, here I've used retrofit for the network part and room for the database part. So, I've used a remote mediator for getting the data from network and putting it into the database. But like second step is making your database paging source so that the data can be fetched from pager and passed ahead. But with room, paging source is automatically implemented, so I did not have the need to actually create a paging source in this demo. And Also here, like we need to maintain remote keys. So remote keys are maintained because every time you make a network call, you need to keep track of what pages you need to load. So those also I've kept in the database. And here you can see like this is a similar demo as demo one. It is showing list of TV shows which are airing today, and they also have list separators and the loading footer as well. So as I told earlier that I am maintaining remote keys here. So I'm maintaining the remote key, the previous next key, and I am using remote mediator. So as I mentioned, like when you are using layered architecture, you need to use remote mediator. So here I'm using remote mediator, and as you can see, it takes your service and database instance, and it also has the load method which is used to connect to network and get the data and put it into the database. And the return type is mediator result. So you'll either be getting mediator result dot success or dot error. And in the load, it is taking two parameters: the load type and the state. So load type can be refresh, append, prepend. So and state is the data which is currently loaded in the database. So a refresh is when you make a load, it's your initial load basically. Prepend is when the user scrolls up, and append is when the user scrolls down and you load more items. So here, like, I'm getting the remote key based on the load state, and after I get the remote key, I'm making a network call and I'm getting the data, putting it in the database. If it's a refresh, I'm clearing the database first before populating the database with the new data. And then I keep track of remote keys as well in the database. And after, like, when I load the data and I get the result, then, and if it's successful, then I need to return mediator result dot success, and then I need to pass in the whether I've reached the end of pagination or not. So if I've not reached the end of pagination and there's more data to load, I'll pass it as false. If I've reached the end of pagination and there's no more data to load, I'll pass it as true. And in case of any errors or exception, I'll pass the mediator result dot error. And then here, when I create a pager, I need to pass the remote mediator instance and the paging source factory instance. And also, paging 3 components, they are backward compatible with paging 2, so you can migrate incrementally. And if you come across any issues with paging 3, then feel free to open an issue in the issue tracker. And a Google team will look into that, and they have completely rewritten paging 2 library, and paging 3 is compatible. Like, paging 3 has been completely written with Kotlin and Coroutines, so they'll look at the enhancements or requirements needed in the paging library. So that was the end of the session. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at my Gmail or Twitter or LinkedIn. And now the stage is open for Q&A. So first question is the sample app published on GitHub? So it's not, but I'll do it after the session, and I'll share the link in Talc.